Val was a little alarmed by this boy's request. She had tried to explain the situation as carefully as possible. From her interactions with his father, E was someone they probably shouldn't offend. The way Han was easily able to hand over a platinum bar to pay for E's studies meant that their family had significant wealth. Explaining the capabilities of the room was something she hadn't done in a while. Normally, Val didn't interact with a new student, especially with the examination portion. Though an S-rank spell is the highest this room can withstand, the number of people who can complete an S-rank spell could be counted on 2 hands. To allow him multiple attempts would be unfair to other students, especially after they had gone through so much effort to accommodate E. After her explanation, E looked a little annoyed by her answer, but faced the target on the wall. He looked to be thinking about something and softly said the word, "burn." Before she could think how this was a spell she was unfamiliar with, the entire wall seemed to turn into a raging inferno. Val jumped away to give some distance, but the heat from the spell seemed to envelop her, causing her to instantly become soaked in sweat. Everything in her body was screaming at her to leave her current location. Even after she prepared a shielding spell around her, the spell started to instantly crack, as the magic that was being pummeled into it was overwhelming the capabilities of the spell. Instead of placing more mana into the spell, Val quickly made hand gestures and said, "I cast Tri-Shield type Delta." Just as the shield was about to shatter, 3 rainbows covered her before disappearing. This was one of the strongest defensive shields she knew, which would protect against A-rank and below spells. When she thought everything would be fine, the first layer of shields started to crack. Looking at the lines that were spreading out, she began to panic and dropped to the ground as her legs gave out in fright. Val had no spell stronger than the one she just used, so she could only watch helplessly as the first shield shattered and the second shield began to show signs of being overwhelmed. Looking towards E, she screamed, "My lord, please stop the spell!" Usually stopping a spell midway was dangerous and would cause a backlash on the caster, but at this pace, Val would be incinerated by E's hellish spell. E casually looked at her, as if this spell was nothing. With a brief wave of his hand, the inferno was suddenly dispersed as if it was never there to begin with. Looking back at her shield, she saw that the final shield looked similar to ice that was hit by a heavy hammer. How close she was to dying was not lost on her, as she touched her shield and like glass, it shattered. She could feel the blood draining away from her face, and before she fainted, Val was able to recover. "What spell was that?" she exclaimed to E, pointing at the wall that had cracks all throughout it. If the spell had continued, she could only imagine the amount of damage it would have caused. The master prepared a weak fire spell for fear of damaging this room. The woman named Helania spoke in an infuriatingly calm voice. It felt like she was challenging Val to state otherwise. "I apologize if the spell was too great, Val," E said to her, appearing embarrassed by all of this. The woman named Queen angrily said, "Master, there is no reason for you to apologize. You had asked ahead of time if you could have the chance to measure the power of your spell, and this woman arrogantly denied you this right while claiming about this room handling an S-rank spell, whatever this ranking means." Now, there was no reason to criticize the late knight. She was merely doing her job, and providing multiple attempts would obviously be unfair to other students. E tried to come to her defense. "But master," the girl Brittany tried to protest, but stopped when E raised his hand. Shakily getting off the floor, Val smoothed out her outfit to help her come to grips with what could have happened. Sounds of rubble falling to the ground reminded her that her reality was shaken, leaving her with a sense of how big this world is. By E's own admission, the action he performed was considered to be a reasonable one, but considering how this room was graded, his thinking was wrong. Looking at him, she imagined him to be akin to the void, where the deeper you go into it, the more questions you find yourself asking. With how he stood in front of that blast, E didn't seem to be affected by it, though this would make sense. The questionable part is how none of his servants seemed to react to it. They acted as if his power was to be expected and could withstand the secondary effects, the intense heat, the force of the mana. Likely, the secondary parts wouldn't have been as bad if this was outside, but being in an enclosed area caused the excess mana to be trapped with nowhere to go. My lord, I cannot believe how you are able to perform an S-rank spell at such a young age. There did not appear to be any hand gestures used in preparing the spell. I have never seen such strong ability. Val tried to say it calmly, while she felt her body shaking. If this boy was so powerful, then what would this say for the rest of his family, she thought to herself. Giving her a smile, E simply stated, I was only able to perform such spells due to my own diligence and my father's guidance. Val nearly gasped at the statement, considering how simple he made it sound like. Could diligence and teaching be able to create someone that could generate spells strong enough to wipe out a platoon of soldiers? Due to the damage that was done, we will now be able to continue with the other parts of the examination. Considering your magical abilities, I declare that the examination is not necessary and we will proceed with accepting you to the academy. If you will follow me, we will proceed with creating an ID card for you to carry around. Walking out of the room, they made their way back to the first floor of the tower. Of the many booths that circled the base of the tower, Val headed towards the one marked Admissions, and skipped the line of students that were waiting to have their paperwork turned in. The man that was working at the booth initially looked annoyed, but when he recognized her, he stood up quickly. Lady Knight, how may I be of assistance to you? He squeaked. The only time this man would have seen the Lady Knight would be when the student council made announcements to the academy, so seeing her in front of him would be an unusual event. I will need an ID card created for the student, as soon as possible, Val informed him with a tone that stated her desire for obedience. Of course, we can proceed with the ID right now. The man fell over his words as he tried to please her wishes. He turned towards E and asked, If you come into the back room, I will be able to process your ID card, my lord. He was respectful, considering no typical student would be escorted by the Lady Knight. She watched as E walked into the back room where his name and magic rank would be listed. As he completed tasks and studied further into his field of study, the card would be updated here. His card could also be used in all the guilds within the tower, which many students found to be very convenient. The Academy's ability to measure an individual's magic ability was unparalleled. When Val had reserved the magic room, the magic system within the room automatically updated the status of the student into the database. Since E destroyed the system, his status was made to reflect an S-rank status. Thinking about what had happened, she felt herself shudder in terror. Once she completed her task, she needed to go to the president and let him know how much they couldn't offend E. Glancing over at E's servants, she realized how amazing the three of them looked. Compared to other women, these three looked like goddesses walking amongst them. How long have you been working for E's father? Val tried to casually ask them. The way they didn't talk was slightly disconcerting. The three women looked at one another, and the one called Helania answered, We have been a part of the Master's family since the very beginning. Oh, so you were born into the roles. Your parents must be very proud that you are working for such a great family, she said, trying to figure out what they meant. It wasn't often that servants would have their children serve the same family. Usually, the children would grow up and learn a new trade instead of remaining in the main family. It really spoke to how influential E's family is to have such loyal servants. Han was looking at his ID card as he left the booth area and walked with Val and the girls. Unlike on Earth, these cards were not made out of plastic and instead created by a metallic-looking mana crystal. This allowed the Academy to add in information when accomplishments were stacked up on the student. The student would just need to return back to the admission booth, and the official would update the information from the central system. Listening to Val explain all of this, the system here reminded him of a network of computers. Though the information that passed throughout the system was nowhere near the level of data that was contained on the internet, it was still a very creative idea. During his time on Earth, Han had messed around with network security, so he wondered if there was a similar way of doing this. If he really needed information, he could just use his ability to gain the information, so using such a roundabout method was unnecessary. He just imagined him acting like a spy in those espionage films. He would think about this more when he arrived at his housing unit. Leaving the tower, Val escorted him to his new home. The benefit of being so highly thought of, Han's house was fairly close to the tower. Reaching the housing unit, Han saw that it looked like a very large country house. Based on the windows, he saw that the house had 3 floors. There was a 5-foot wall that surrounded his property line, and past it, there was a nice large lawn with a water fountain in the middle of the path that led to the front door. A part of him pictured this house belonging to some European countryside, with rows upon rows of grapes growing for his wine. Thinking about wine made him wonder what the level of alcoholic drinks was at. Walking past the manicured lawns had him thinking about hosting dinner parties under a starry sky. He would need to make some acquaintances, maybe friends, so that he could host those parties that everyone seemed to talk about on Earth. Dinner parties seemed to be the things that all adults did once they started making a significant amount of money. With his own financial situation, dinner parties weren't ever a possibility, though Beth would talk about them constantly. Sometimes, Sam would host dinner parties and invite everyone to his house, and they would watch the amazing dishes he prepared. They had a lot of fun at these social events, though Han would sometimes have to skip them due to schedule conflict with work. Beth would go by herself, and when he came back from work, he would listen to her talking about everything that happened, like how great Sam was at cooking and hosting parties. He sometimes felt jealous about how put together Sam's life was, especially every time Beth bragged about him, but Han would beat himself up later for it, because being jealous of your best friend was never a healthy thing. Han was startled from his thoughts by a hand on his shoulder. Looking up, he saw Helania with a concerned expression on her face. Shaking his head, Han let her know that everything was fine. While Val had reached the door to his house, Han had stopped and stared at the lawn, which caused Helania to reach out to him. Queen and Brittany also looked like they wanted to come to give him a hug. The girls likely knew that there was something that had happened to him, so they were hypersensitive to his moods.